According to the CDC, as of 2018, about 32% of Americans were overweight and 42% were obese. And now this problem isn't only seen in adults, but also in adolescents. Here in America, about 22% of adolescents are also been diagnosed with obesity. And the problem here is that it often tracks from adolescence into adulthood. If we can identify opportunities to prevent obesity, this would have a major impact on both national and individual health. Now, I think we are all pretty much aware that eating a healthy diet, avoiding processed foods are the keys to avoiding obesity. What you may not be aware of is that exercise can play an important role in prevention too. Hi, I'm Dr. Edmond Cleeman. I'm an orthopedic surgeon here in New York. I specialize in sports medicine and arthroscopic surgery. Let's first talk about the significant risk of being sedentary is on developing obesity. So in this first study that we're going to review, this study had about 50,000 women with a BMI less than 30, and they followed them over a period of 6 years. And they found that time spent watching TV was positively associated with the risk of obesity, meaning that the more TV, the higher the risk of developing obesity and even developing type 2 diabetes. And what they actually found when they broke it down was that for each 2-hour per day increased increment of TV watching was associated with a 23% increased risk of obesity and a 14% increased risk of getting diabetes. They also found that for each 2-hour per day increment of sitting at work was also associated with about a 5% increased risk of obesity and a 7% increased risk in diabetes. Now, in contrast, standing or walking around at home by an additional 2 hours per day was associated with a 9% reduction in obesity and a 12% reduction in diabetes. And for each 1 hour per day of brisk walking, so really, maybe even getting a little bit of a sweat, was associated with a 24% reduction in obesity. So this study of many people clearly highlights how being sedentary really increases the risk of becoming obese over the course of several years. Now let's switch gears and talk about how actually physically doing exercise will help prevent developing obesity in the future. In the first study that we'll review with a little less than 5,000 people over the age of 20, what they found was that those people who were doing at least 5 bouts of physical activity per week had a 50% lower risk of being obese than those who were physically inactive. There are different kinds of exercise. Obviously, there's aerobic exercise and strength training exercise. And so this next study will talk about the importance of strength exercises to also help reduce that risk of developing obesity. The physical activity guidelines indicate that people should do about 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous aerobic exercise per week and at least 2 days of strength exercises per week as well. So in this study, they looked at 900 women between the ages of 20 and 80. And what they found is that women who were not meeting those 2 days at least of strength exercises per week, they were much more likely, more than 2 times likely to be obese than those who were doing strength exercises at least twice per week. And they also found that for those women who did not meet either the aerobic or the strength recommendations, they had the highest prevalence of obesity, where about 40% of those women in that category of doing neither of the recommendations were found to be obese. Cardiorespiratory fitness, how well we are able to get oxygen from out in the air into our lungs, into our muscles, is also another important indicator of our general health, and also specifically here can also be an indicator of the risk for developing obesity in the future. So again, having a higher cardiorespiratory fitness means that someone is healthier. So let's look at this next study that looked at cardiorespiratory fitness. So here, this is a study of about 459 adults, and they followed them over a 20-year follow-up period. And what they found was that having a greater cardiorespiratory fitness was associated with lower risk or odds of being obese, about a 13% lower risk of developing obesity. Now, in those women who had higher cardiorespiratory fitness, they resulted in lower odds of a 10 kilogram weight gain compared to those who did not have a higher cardiorespiratory fitness. And again, the best way to increase cardiorespiratory fitness is by exercising. So if someone exercises, like we said, we can increase that cardiorespiratory fitness. What impact will that have if someone does that on their risk of developing obesity in the future? And so here's another study that actually looked at what happens when someone increases their cardiorespiratory fitness. So in this study of about 4,600 men and about 724 women, and so what they found was that for each 1 minute improvement in treadmill time, that reduced the risk of putting on 5 kilograms of weight by 14% in men and 9% in women. So again, if you can improve your treadmill time, which is looking at cardiorespiratory fitness, will reduce the risk of putting on an extra 5 kilograms in both men and women. Now, this study also found that for each 1 minute improvement in treadmill time, reduced the odds of putting on more than 10 kilograms by 21% in men and also 21% in women. So this study shows that if we can increase your cardiorespiratory fitness, which again needs to be done typically through exercise, we can really reduce the risk of putting on more weight as time goes on. Let's wrap up this video and go over a few key points. Number one, sedentary time, such as sitting at home and watching TV or even sitting at your desk, can increase your risk of developing obesity. Number two, being physically active or introducing exercise can also reduce your risk of developing obesity in the future. Number three, there are different kinds of exercise, both aerobic and muscle strength exercises, and both of these can play an important role in reducing the risk of developing obesity. Number four, having a high level of cardiorespiratory fitness or increasing your cardiorespiratory fitness through exercise can also reduce your risk of developing obesity or putting on weight in the future. And finally, number five, of course, eating healthy, reducing your intake of processed foods plays a critical role in reducing the risk of developing obesity. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, please click the like button below and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in my office or in my next video.